Unlike my previous foray into story-based DLCs with Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, where I crowbarred it into the actual review, this DLC pack was long enough to get its own video. Yes, Epic Games actually put in the colossal effort to create an expansion pack for Gears of War 3, something rare in the story-based DLC biz, as we've seen with Blade Wolf and Jetstream Sam's chapters where it was cobbled together out of pre-existing assets. However, those were eventually made free to users, which I like, and RAAM Shadow is still being sold at its original price of $15. Do I think it's worth that much? Well, let's find out. The story of this game begins as a prequel to the entire Gears trilogy that it sorely needed, because throughout all three games, we're never told directly what E-Day was, since it was never that important apparently. And I can see why with the explanation they gave here, where E-Day was essentially the Locust's first uprising from underground due to the Lambent, and they're just wrecking up the place for shits and giggles. It's kind of a letdown, but alright for me as an act of war. In this pack, we play as a COG unit trying to evacuate the city before a predicted Krill storm, basically the disaster that we saw in Gears 1. And yes, the COG knows that this Krill storm is going to hit since they evacuated Alima City before this expansion even started, so I have no idea why it came as a surprise that RAAM would have been involved in it, since the Krill storm needed the Cedars to be summoned. Plot holes aside, the COGs are working to help evacuate the remaining humans in the city soon to be obliterated, and it's the standard Gears 3 model with no variation. You go through a bunch of brown ruined cities and shoot locusts all the long day. Yeah, with Gears 4 coming out later this year, I'm hoping that what they've been saying about getting back to Gears 2 is true, because this only corridor shooting approach is fucking boring. FPS games can usually get away with it because they tend to run between 5 and 8 hours of play, but imagine players falling asleep because you've overstayed your welcome. That's why FPS games usually put in a driving bit or a pseudo-horror level, because variety keeps some level of interest thrumming towards it, and thankfully that variation came in the form of the RAAM levels, where we actually get to play the badass himself, and his mechanics are unique, awesome, and correct. RAAM has only one attack: the Finger of Doom. Yeah, the name sucks, but it's also a perfect description, because what he does is he commands his Krill shield to run around and pulverize anything that stands in his way. Another reason why this is awesome is because it does the Black Ops 2 thing and basically makes RAAM invincible, with his Krill shield making him invulnerable to bullets. RAAM also has a knife, but who the fuck cares about that when he's basically Locust's death? The bad part about RAAM sections is that they're only one note: kill COG so that the Cedars can be summoned. However, while it's boring, it meshes with the plot well, and it shouldn't have taken center stage, since RAAM is just an extension of Mira's will and not his own character. The story ends with a meeting of the two sides, with RAAM's final battle, who bastardizes the character we've been playing on all fronts so that the battle can make sense. This was necessary to do so, but you could have dumbed down the invincibility of RAAM while keeping his playstyle, like have his Krill attack in patterns of his control, or maybe increase the time between Krill attack and Krill death, and make the Krill slower so that we can actually dodge. Adding in a Reaver and bait grenades that were never mentioned is a total ass pull. So back to the original question: is RAAM Shadow worth the exorbitant price? Well, yes and no. Compared to other offerings, this expansion pack DLC is a unique experience from the game it came from, and a lot of work went into it despite a simple plot packed into a single act, and it does give us the needed prequel information in the wrong place. And it does have the great power fantasy of just getting to rip shit up as General RAAM, but while it's a great example of DLC, $15 is simply too much, especially for 5-year-old expansions, and it should have come down to $11 at this point in the very least. You probably could have gotten away with that price point during the original run because people were rabid for it at the time, but when demand dies for the expansion, the price has to follow suit. You don't have to make this bargain bin, but it does have to come down at least slightly. But anyway, I did enjoy the experience, and it really does show what kind of support quality DLC can actually give a game when you treat it with respect.